What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. It is Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas to all of you guys. Hope you guys have a safe holiday amid all the COVID kind of situations. But we're here. This is week 16. It's championship week. This is the second installment of the start sit video that I'm coming at you with today. We are going through quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends. The 9 games that I'm going through today will be listed in the timestamps. If you want to hear me talk about a particular game, you don't have to listen to me talk about everything. You can just go to the timestamp, check that game, and be on your merry way towards hopefully a fantasy championship. So before we get into this today, if you guys receive any value from this video, please hit the like button. It helps us out tremendously. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We will not be having a live stream before tomorrow's game, tomorrow being Friday because it is Christmas Day. But instead, Saturday morning before the Saturday games, we will be going over our rankings live on a live stream about 12 p.m. Eastern time. If you guys want to join us for that, you can ask your questions relating to the Saturday games at that point, and then we'll also be live Sunday morning as well. But before we do that, let's get into the intro. All right, guys. So the first game we have up here today is the Bengals at the Texans. This is a 1 p.m. game. We're starting with about halfway in between the 1 p.m. games for this video. We have at the quarterback position, Deshaun Watson is a start. Ryan Finley is obviously a sit. A number of bad matchups in a row for Deshaun Watson. He had to play the Colts twice and a number of other bad teams. You would think that the Bengals are actually quite a good matchup for him. However, the Cincinnati Bengals have played much better on defense and are actually the worst matchup for quarterbacks over the last 5 games. A large contributor for that is the offenses that they've played. We just saw them. The Pittsburgh Steelers aren't the greatest offense in the world, but they did stymie them Monday night. And then they also played like the Giants and a number of other bad teams. But Deshaun Watson, not in a smash matchup necessarily, but it is enough for me to start someone like Tom Brady, who I talked about yesterday, over him in my home league. To the running back position in this game, we have Gio Bernard and David Johnson. I would say to sit Gio Bernard or low-end flex Gio Bernard, depending on your situation, and start David Johnson. We have, on David Johnson, we've now seen over the course of the season that David Johnson is a guy who will receive workhorse volume anytime Duke Johnson is out of the lineup. He averages 5 receptions in the games where Duke Johnson has not played, and that alone is enough for him to be locked into top 18 running back territory for me this week against Cincinnati. And I believe I actually have him up around RB14. So I'm more than okay starting a guy like David Johnson this week. On Gio Bernard, he actually is kind of teetering on the borderline of the top 24 that I mentioned is the cutoff for this week. I currently have him at RB25 after we saw him perform against Pittsburgh, who's a much tougher matchup than Houston in this game. We know Houston has just been absolutely terrible against the run all season, especially recently. This matchup is great for him. So I suppose if you're caught between probably Darrell Henderson or someone like that, I would choose Gio Bernard because I think you could do worse if you lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire or you lost Ronald Jones or you lost Cam Akers these past couple of weeks. There is a number of injuries. So a guy like Gio Bernard could be a guy that you slot into your lineup if you're without a guy like Ronald Jones, who, breaking news, he's just been ruled out for this game. And maybe you don't have Leonard Fournette like myself. To the wide receiver position in this game, we have Brandon Cooks and T. Higgins. I say you would start Brandon Cooks and flex T. Higgins, and then I would sit everyone else, including Tyler Boyd, in this game. Brandon Cooks on the Houston side of things is set to see shadow coverage from William Jackson in this matchup. He's not an overly concerning shadow corner, but he has been fairly solid recently. Seeing that Cooks has 5+ receptions, though, in every game since Will Fuller went out, I'm more than okay starting him as a top 24 receiver. T. Higgins, on the other hand, I have him at wide receiver 30. So he is literally at the borderline of where I would start a receiver. He is pretty much the last guy I would start. T. Higgins has 100% seen a downtick since Joe Burrow has been out of the lineup, but Houston is a top 5 matchup for T. Higgins. And the Bengals passing game overall should be able to move the ball in this one. We saw Ryan Finley actually have a fairly decent game against a very good defense on Monday. This defense is significantly worse than the one that they more or less carved up last Monday. The Bengals receivers all around the board have good matchups here, as you can see on the screen. And Watson on the other side of the ball will put up points, so it could force the Bengals to have to throw the ball a bit in this one. T. Higgins against Keon Crossan should be a great matchup for him. He is actually the guy that guarded Deontay Johnson last week, and Deontay Johnson was pretty good in that matchup. So I think T. Higgins is a guy that you can throw into your lineup at wide receiver 30. I am currently doing so because I lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Ronald Jones as my flex plays. I will be starting T. Higgins this game. I'm not overly confident in T. Higgins' ability to perform, but I think he is usable. This is a good matchup for him. To the tight end position in this game, there's absolutely no tight ends to speak of. Drew Sample, Jordan Akins, these guys had their time, but they're no longer relevant for fantasy at this point in the season. To the next game that we have here, we have the Giants at the Ravens. At the quarterback position in this game, you would sit whoever the Giants starting quarterback is, whether Daniel Jones plays or whether it's Colt McCoy, and then Lamar Jackson, you will be starting. Giants have been quite stingy against the quarterback position the past couple of weeks. Last week, obviously, Baker Mayfield had a great game, but James Bradbury missed last week against Cleveland, being on the COVID list. He will be back for this game. He's already been activated from the COVID list, but Lamar has been rushing at a high rate over the past, 8 weeks or so since I pretty much told you to trade for him. And he's been doing so with great effectiveness now. So I wouldn't expect that to stop anytime soon. I don't think the Giants defense is quite good enough. I don't think Blake Martinez and the linebackers and stuff that they have going there are going to be quick enough to handle Lamar Jackson on the ground. So I think Lamar Jackson, via his legs as usual, and probably a bit through the passing game as well, is going to be able to provide solid fantasy value for you in this game. And I have absolutely no qualms in starting him. To the running back position, we have J.K. Dobbins, who is a start, and Wayne Gallman, who is a sit. We know exactly what to expect out of J.K. Dobbins. It's a 15 to 18 touch type role for J.K. Dobbins. He's going to play feature back snaps. He's playing 55 to 65% of the snaps usually on any given week. And he has a shot at a touchdown or two potentially. Unfortunately, the highest a feature back for this offense has been for Baltimore really has been what J.K. Dobbins has receiving in terms of snaps, volume, targets, all that kind of stuff. But the efficiency of the offense on the ground, as well as the efficiency of J.K. Dobbins being that he's such a good player, make him a top 15 option in this matchup with the volume that he's seeing. So no qualms about starting J.K. Dobbins. I think he's in a tier behind the guys that they're getting the volume, like the guys like Nick Chubb and the guys like James Robinson, if he plays. Like those kind of guys are the guys I would play ahead of J.K. Dobbins, but J.K. Dobbins is in the next tier with guys like DeAndre Swift, who we think are getting volume, but we don't 100% know that for sure. Wayne Gallman, on the other hand, we thought he was going to be kind of in that same territory. We thought he was going to be a safe option for the rest of the season with Devontae Freeman out. But the blowouts of the Giants and the ineptitude, to be honest, of the Giants offense have really not allowed for the same type of thing for that J.K. Dobbins has experienced with a lot of touchdown opportunities and all that stuff. So there is a chance that they get blown out in this game, similar to the way that they have the past couple of weeks. There's a chance that Baltimore runs away with this game. We just saw Baltimore absolutely blow the doors off of Jacksonville. I wouldn't be surprised if they did the same in this game. I don't think the Giants are quite as inept as Jacksonville, but they are still a bad team without their starting quarterback. So I am definitely not comfortable starting Wayne Gallman. I would consider him a desperation play. He's inside my top 30 running backs, but he is not inside RB2 range for me. So he's a high-end RB3. I suppose you could start him if you, again, are without CEH, Cam Akers, or Ronald Jones, but I'm not comfortable with it at all. I'm sure there's another receiver option if it's like a flex decision that you're looking for that you could start instead of Wayne Gallman. To the wide receiver position in this game, I would sit every single wide receiver in this game. Hollywood Brown has been playing better lately, but in this house, we do not mess with James Bradbury. James Bradbury is a great corner, especially with a fringe flex type play like Hollywood Brown, who he's being matched up against. As you can see on the screen, Marquise Brown is expected to be shadowed by James Bradbury. Des Bryant, I'm not screwing around with him. Neither am I screwing around with Willie Snead. And then on the Giants side of things, we have bad matchups all the way around for the Giants defense without their starting quarterback again. As I mentioned, never Giants with the Giants passing game. I would honestly just avoid it altogether, except for maybe their tight end, which I'll get into in a second. Darius Slayton against Anthony Averett is not it's not a terrible matchup for Darius Slayton, but Darius Slayton has been super inconsistent, and I just absolutely cannot trust him under any circumstances, really. And then Sterling Shepard against Marlon Humphrey is just a terrible matchup, so he's not touching my lineup either. As I mentioned with the tight ends, both of them are startable, with Andrews being a great start. We've seen him have a couple good games together now since the Ravens schedule has eased up a bit. And the Giants are a top 15 matchup for him. So he should be en route to like another 70-yard, potentially catches a touchdown type of game for Andrews. Hopefully for my sake, I do have him in my home league, and I really do need him to do well for me because I am without a couple guys, as I mentioned. Although downgraded based on Daniel Jones potentially being out for this game, I think Evan Ingram is still a guy that you can put into your lineup, given that we know what his volume is going to be. We've seen it all season. He's a guy that's going to get, on the low end of things, 5 targets. On the high end of things, he could get 11 targets. So that makes Evan Ingram a guy that needs to be in your lineup unless you have a lot better of options. For example, if you have Logan Thomas or something, I would probably start him over Evan Ingram. But unless you have one of those top 10 tight ends types, then I would probably just roll with Evan Ingram because he should be pretty fine in this game. To the next game that we have here, we have the Browns at the Jets. My start of the week at the quarterback position is Baker Mayfield. The reason for that is that Baker Mayfield is playing with a lot of confidence right now, and he has 4 straight games in which he has 2+ touchdowns and 250 passing yards, also scored a rushing touchdown in that span. The New York Jets are both top 3 on the season and top 3 in their last 5 games in giving up fantasy points to the quarterback position. We saw even a struggling Russell Wilson, who's been pretty bad up until he played the Jets a couple of weeks ago, do well against this Jets defense, and there's good reason for that. They're playing undrafted free agents basically at corner. Quinnen Williams, their best player on defense, is out for this game likely. He sustained an injury last week. And I currently have Baker Mayfield at 11 as a result, and I would play him over a guy like Russell Wilson, which I never thought I'd say earlier this season, that I would be playing Baker Mayfield over Russell Wilson in the fantasy championships. But that's where we're at with Russell Wilson. I think it speaks more on him than it does to Baker Mayfield, although Baker Mayfield is playing a lot better recently. To the running back position in this game, we have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. One you are starting and one you are sitting. Yes, I am sitting Kareem Hunt, and I'm also sitting all the Jets running backs too. Don't be messing around with them. But I tried to warn everyone last week not to go overboard on Cam Akers. And the reason I said that was because the Jets' run defense is actually pretty good. Now, I mentioned they are going to be without Quinnen Williams in this game, which downgrades the run defense a bit, but it is a defense that primarily is a pass funnel, which means that we expect the Browns to win this game via the pass. Akers disappointed last week. Was it because of his injury? Was it because of the Jets defense? Was it because of the game script? All those things played a factor, but he wasn't as effective as a lot of people thought he was going to be. And the reason is because the Jets are good against the run. And not only that, but teams are passing in neutral scripts against the Jets at a high ass rate because they can do so. It's not hard to pass on the Jets because they have a terrible pass defense. It is somewhat of a challenge to run on the Jets. So teams just pass on them because that's what they're so bad against the pass. And Kareem Hunt is not secure enough as a pass catcher to be locked and loaded as a flex play. And finally, with this game script, there's a chance that the Browns blow them out. And if that happens, we might see Nick Chubb kind of running the game out, getting a lot of carries from that perspective. Or if they're blowing him out enough, we might not see Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt very much in this game. I'd rather start Myles Gaskin, Le'Veon Bell, or Jeff Wilson over Kareem Hunt, to be honest. I think all 3 of those guys have more secure roles. They're in line for more volume, and the game script should be better for all 3 of those guys. So Kareem Hunt is not necessarily a locked and loaded slam dunk like maybe we thought he could be. His only 2 real good games since Nick Chubb has been back have both been against Baltimore, and those are divisional matchups where both teams just like to run the ball. I don't really know what to make of those, but Kareem Hunt is not a guy I'm starting confidently by any means. To the wide receiver position, we have Jarvis Landry, who is a start for me, a strong start at that, and a low-end flex play kind of Rashard Higgins, not T. Higgins. Jarvis Landry has been absolutely a target monster, as has Higgins, pretty much since Odell Beckham has been hurt and since they've been playing good weather games. In a game where we expect just absolutely bonkers numbers from Baker and a lot of big plays and just blown coverages from the Jets, because that's just what the Jets do, I think his receivers are definitely in play, being Jarvis and Rashard Higgins. I think Jarvis is a very strong play against Javelin Goodry in the slot. Bryce Hall against Rashard Higgins is probably a mismatch for Rashard Higgins, although Bryce Hall is not a terrible corner. And then DPJ, I mean, I guess he's only kind of like a DFS play, but I think with the game situation that we have for the Cleveland Browns, I think the Jets are definitely in a position to give up a lot of fantasy points to the receiver position. And then to the tight end position in this game, we have the Browns tight ends. I would sit both of them. Volume for them have been relatively split all year. We have Harrison Bryant and Austin Hooper. Neither guy has a sustainable role. Either guy goes off one week. One guy is out next week. Like it's pretty much just back and forth with those guys. We saw Austin Hooper catch a touchdown last week, but neither of them are startable in my opinion. The next game that we have here is the Broncos at the Chargers. At the quarterback position in this game, you'll be starting Justin Herbert and sitting Drew Lock. I don't mind Lock from a DFS perspective, but as far as season-long leagues in the fantasy championship, he's just too risky to be playing, even in a pretty solid matchup, or I guess a league average matchup. But Justin Herbert, on the other hand, should be in line for another great game against a top 12 matchup. I hope you guys, I tweeted this out after the Raiders game last week, but I hope you guys didn't listen to the lazy analysis that because Justin Herbert was bad against 2 of the better defenses of the last 8 weeks or so, being the Falcons and the Patriots, that made him a sit in the game against the Raiders. Because I said before that game, I was pretty adamant saying that Justin Herbert is going to do well in this game because he's playing defenses the past couple weeks before that game that were on hot streaks. And I think it's best to always focus on recent defensive trends, which is why I bring up the last 5 games or so for most defenses, because I don't think it serves anyone to get stuck into what was true earlier in the season. I think teams like the Seahawks and teams like the Falcons and certain other teams have their numbers very much skewed by what happened earlier in the season, and both of those defenses are playing a lot better as of late. So Justin Herbert, definitely a start in this one, and I hope you did not start him last week, or else you might be out of the playoffs right now. Or sorry, I hope you did start him last week, or else you might be out of the playoffs right now. To the running back position in this game, we have Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Both of them are starts for me. We saw last week that against Los Angeles Chargers defense that is ranked amongst the league worst against the run in terms of DVOA. Josh Jacobs absolutely dominated on the ground, not necessarily efficiency-wise, but the attempts were there. He got 2 touchdowns, and I think that Gordon should be able to take advantage of this defense with the 15 to 20 touches that he typically gets and potentially cash in on a touchdown as well. So I think he's a solid RB2 for me. I wouldn't be too worried about throwing him into your lineup either. For Austin Eckler, we heard before last week's game that Eckler would be limited in some fashion. The only thing that really dipped off for him last week was his receiving volume. He did run a pretty similar amount of routes that he normally runs. He ran about 27 routes last week, which is always amongst the league most in terms of the running back position. I'm not really sure what that means going into this game, whether he's going to be back to full strength in terms of his health or whatever. But he is still a top 10 start regardless for me at the running back position, because this is a league average defense, and Eckler just gets way too much receiving volume for you to be fading him in this matchup. To the wide receiver position, we have Keenan Allen, and that's it, in my opinion. I think if you have Keenan Allen, it's likely that you didn't make the fantasy finals, but my opponent this week was able to overcome it because he had Josh Allen and David Montgomery and another number of other guys that went off for him last week. So if Keenan is in there for you, he is definitely a strong start. And when I say he's in there for you, it means he's not limited in any fashion, and he practices to some degree this week. Knowing that the Broncos have been absolutely awful against the pass since they've lost all their corners. They lost Isang Bassi, their slot corner, a couple weeks ago. They lost AJ Boye to suspension a couple weeks ago, and they also lost Bryce Callahan a couple weeks ago. So they are down their top 3 corners, as I've mentioned previously. Keenan Allen should be in for a big game in this one. You can see he's going up against Will Parks in the slot, who is the backup to Isang Bassi. So you can imagine he's probably not very good. And if Keenan Allen is at full strength in this game, then you can expect him to do pretty well. And then on the screen right now, you'll see the matchups for Denver. I'm not messing with any of these dudes. You can be my guest if you want to start Tim Patrick or Jerry Jeudy or KJ Hamler in your fantasy finals. But I'd imagine if you're in the fantasy finals, you should have better options than that. And to the tight end position, we have both Noah Fant and Hunter Henry. Both guys are starts. Fant has been absolutely pretty much excellent after the catch and is much healthier now than he was a few weeks ago. So I'm willing to trust him against a league average defense against tight ends and overall. Hunter Henry, on the other hand, isn't the same type of tight end that Noah Fant is. He's not necessarily going to get a lot of catches and a lot of yardage, but he is definitely capable of catching a couple passes and getting into the end zone in this game. So both guys, strong starts for me, both in my top 10. And then to the next game that we have here, we have the Panthers at the Washington Football Team. At the quarterback position in this game, you are sitting both quarterbacks. We pretty much know what Teddy Bridgewater is at this point in the season. He has absolutely zero games with more than 2 touchdowns, and that is not a ceiling that you can depend on or that you can bet on in your championship, because we have a number of quarterbacks this week, like Tom Brady, like Justin Herbert, like Deshaun Watson, that all have crazy good ceilings because of the matchups that they have. So betting on a guy like Teddy Bridgewater is probably not going to win you your championship. It might get you 15 points, but that's not exactly going to help you win. No idea who you should start this week, or who will start this week, for the Washington Football Team. Apparently, Alex Smith has a real chance of playing, according to Washington beat reporters. So for the sake of J.D. McKissick, Terry McLaurin, and Logan Thomas, I think Smith provides them the best chance of fantasy relevance. It probably provides the team the best chance of winning as well. So if Alex Smith is able to play, I think he will be the starting quarterback in this game, especially with the antics of Dwayne Haskins being at some kind of party or strip club or whatever he was at. I don't think they want to start Dwayne Haskins. They probably want to bench him because they don't believe in him very much. And Alex Smith being healthy definitely goes a long way in doing that. To the running back position in this game, just a couple minutes ago, we actually got some word that Antonio Gibson with his turf toe is actually practicing in some limited fashion. I'm not exactly sure if that means he's going to be back on the field in this game. I tend to disagree and think he might just be being saved for the playoffs or potentially week 17 and then the playoffs, because as it stands right now, Washington is going to make the playoffs. So I'm sure they would rather get their running back to full health and try and win these games without Antonio Gibson. So if JD McKissic is the starting running back in this game, both he and Mike Davis are low end RB2s for me, set to see some volume. And I'll actually take McKissic over Davis of these two because the easier Panthers run defense that he is going to be facing, who have improved a little bit recently, but are still our better matchup than the vaunted front of the Washington football team. I will definitely take JD McKissic, especially in any kind of PPR league. And then, as I mentioned, McKissic should see a boost with Alex Smith being the projected starter in this game as well. Because we know Alex Smith is check down Alex and just loves to throw a lot of passes to him, even though we saw Dwayne Haskins do the same thing last week. To the wide receiver position in this game, we have Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson. All three are startable. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson have been wide receiver twos, low-end wide receiver twos all season, and nothing really changes for me right now. I would favor DJ Moore if I had to choose between the two guys, but both are solid plays as this Washington pass defense has regressed a bit since the dominant play that they were playing earlier in the season. As you can see on the screen right now, Robbie Anderson does have a worse matchup of the two top guys. Curtis Samuel is not a guy I'm really willing to play, but DJ Moore has Kendall Fuller, which appears to be the best matchup in terms of PFF advantage. So DJ Moore, I think, is a solid start in this game, and he's currently, I believe, like wide receiver 20 or something like that. Terry McLaurin, on the other side of things, we'll see Dante Jackson as a potential shadow matchup. Maybe not a shadow, but he is definitely the primary defender for Terry McLaurin. Dante Jackson has the speed to keep up with Terry McLaurin deep, but he absolutely does not have the technique to keep up with Terry McLaurin as a route runner. So Terry McLaurin should be in for another kind of like 7 reception game, 80 to 100 yards. Hopefully he gets into the end zone for you if you have Terry McLaurin. But yeah, I don't anticipate him struggling very much in this game. I think he's going to be just fine. To the tight end position in this game, we have Logan Thomas, who is a start. He is also another beneficiary of Alex Smith playing because we saw them find a real rapport. And he's been good even with the other quarterbacks on the roster, but he is firmly in my top 12 ahead of a guy like Evan Ingram and Eric Ebron if they both play, just based on the way that Logan Thomas has been being used these past couple of weeks. All right, to the next game we have here, we have the Eagles at Cowboys. And as I mentioned yesterday, if you guys didn't watch the part about the fastest pace games, the slowest pace games, and the most one-sided pace games, I did at the beginning of the episode yesterday, which was Wednesday. So go back and check that out because I gave a pretty in-depth breakdown of the entire slate and how I expect things to go. But the Eagles and Cowboys was one of the more higher pace games of this slate. So that is going to probably lead to a lot more scoring in this game. At the quarterback position, everyone knows Jalen Hurts is the new hotness. He's the guy that everyone wants to start. I think my stance on Jalen Hurts is here we go again. I think people are going to sit great options for Jalen Hurts this week. I think people are going to sit Justin Herbert. They're going to sit Deshaun Watson. They're probably going to sit Tom Brady against a defense who is playing much better. They haven't played excellent opponents, the Dallas Cowboys, but they are a much better defense than they were earlier in the season. They are currently 16th in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks over the last 5 games and 17th on the season. I have the back end QB1, so to speak, ordered like this. My QB5 is Tom Brady. My QB6 is Justin Herbert. My QB7 is Deshaun Watson. My QB8 is Josh Allen. My QB9 is Jalen Hurts. And then my QB10 is Ryan Tannehill, 11 Baker, 12 Stafford. So Jalen Hurts to me is a tier behind the auto start guys. And to me, the auto start guys are those top 8 dudes, with Josh Allen being that he has a tough matchup, being the last of that tier. And then Jalen Hurts, you would start over anyone below that. Tannehill, Baker, Stafford, Goff, all those guys down there. That's who you start Jalen Hurts over, not over guys like Allen, Watson, Herbert, Brady. All those guys have been doing it all season. They've really been all top 10 quarterbacks this entire season, and we have a full season sample of them. We know Jalen Hurts has played well so far this season, but he's really only played in 2 or 3 games, and there's a good chance that in a divisional game, it's a closer game. Maybe he doesn't get out to as big of a passing lead or whatever kind of situation you want to paint for Jalen Hurts. I don't think it's going to be as rosy as it was last week, so just keep that in mind. To the running back position in this game, we have just straight up Payne and Miles Sanders. The reason I say Payne, you'll see the meme that I made on the screen right now, is because Zeke Elliott, he was limited at practice yesterday, and I don't exactly have the data for today's practice schedule, but he says he's on track for week 16. And that is not good if you were someone like me who lost Clyde Edwards-Helaire and lost Ronald Jones, but was able to play Tony Pollard last week, and I could really use him this week with those guys out. Zeke Elliott has only missed 1 game in his entire career, and it was last week. And the other games that he missed were due to suspension, not injury. So it brought on a lot of joy to me personally, knowing that I could start Tony Pollard last week, However, in this game, my gut tells me that, along with the reports that we've seen, that Zeke Elliott is going to play. I think that's what's going to happen, and that means that Tony Pollard probably moves down to like a top 30 running back. I don't think you need to sit him necessarily, but I also don't think he is like some locked and loaded starter like he would be if Zeke Elliott were out for this game. So if Zeke Elliott plays, as far as his own fantasy value, I would say he's a back end RB2, similar to someone like Mike Davis or JD McKissick. And Pollard is, again, a guy that you could maybe throw into your flex spot, but you probably are better off finding other options. For myself, it's between DJ Chark and Tony Pollard if Zeke plays. So I think I'm probably still going to play Tony Pollard just because DJ Chark is just kind of up and down. However, if the fantasy gods bless me and Zeke Elliott misses another game, Pollard is a locked and loaded RB1 coming off of a 9-target, multiple touchdown performance against the Cardinals last week. And then on the Miles Sanders side of things, it's pretty simple. He's an auto start in a top 3 matchup for running backs over the last 5 games. And a number of running backs have absolutely carved this Cowboys run defense up. So no worries about Miles Sanders there. As far as the receiver position goes in this game, we have the Philadelphia Eagles receivers, none of whom should see your starting lineup. We also have Amari Cooper and then a desperation play of CeeDee Lamb. I think you start Amari Cooper for sure. The Cowboys, we know the pecking order basically at this point in the season. It's Cooper first, a great matchup against the team that Amari Cooper, for one, has dominated against since he's been a Dallas Cowboy. He's always done well against the Eagles. And it's a team that may be without Darius Slay yet again. And if that's the case, he should be in for a great game in this one. That should really open up some potential, too, for CeeDee Lamb to have a decent game. As I mentioned, this game is going to be higher paced. So unless you're desperate, I probably wouldn't mess with CeeDee Lamb, but he is my wide receiver 36 currently, and I think he is in play. Again, if you lost someone in your flex spot, I don't think he's a terrible play. As far as the Eagles receivers are concerned, just particularly Jalen Reagor is interesting for next year only, but I am not messing around with those guys for the remainder of this season. I kind of just want to see Reagor string together a couple good games to give me optimism for next year. As I mentioned, for the Cowboys receivers, Amari Cooper is set to see Michael Jacquet in coverage, and that is only assuming that Darius Slay is out again with a concussion. We don't exactly know if that's going to be the case. If Darius Slay is playing, I expect Darius Slay to be shadowing Amari Cooper. But again, Amari Cooper should be able to take advantage of that shadow matchup. And regardless, I think he is a top 20 play just based on volume and his history against this team. To the tight end position, we have Dallas Goedert, who is a start, and Dalton Schultz, who is a sit. 6 to 10 targets in each of the past 6 games for someone like Dallas Goedert. Some of those games have included Zach Ertz as well. Goddard is the starting tight end of this team. He's playing over 80% of the snaps ever since Zach Ertz has been back from his injury. And I wouldn't be surprised if next year Ertz is not even on the team. I think there's a chance they trade him or they cut him or whatever the case may be. I think he's no longer an Eagle after this season, and it's wheels up for Dallas Goedert next year. So Dallas Goedert is definitely a guy that I see as a top 10 tight end. He's more at the back end of that kind of range, but I do think he is 100% startable in this matchup. All right, to the next game we have here. We have the Rams at the Seahawks. At the quarterback position in this game, I think you can stream Russell Wilson, but I would be sitting Jared Goff. Russell Wilson is currently my QB 14, probably the lowest he's been all season considering the start he got out to. This is a bad matchup. It's a very bad matchup. The Rams are 31st over the last 5 games in quarterback scoring allowed, and Russ has had under 10 points the first time that the Rams and Seahawks played in a game where Metcalf is going to be shadowed by Jalen Ramsey. That presents its own set of challenges for Russell Wilson trying to get the ball deep to one of his biggest playmakers, obviously. I will not be starting Russell Wilson over guys like Justin Herbert, over guys like that are great options. I just don't see Russell Wilson as that kind of option. And again, I said I would start Baker Mayfield over Russell Wilson. That's how much I believe in Baker Mayfield and how little I believe in Russell Wilson this week. I think he's still inside my top 15 due to the lack of some other options later down the board, but I don't feel like he's an auto start. I know he probably helped get you to this point, but Russell Wilson, sure, he's talented enough to make me eat my words, but he has not been playing well, and this matchup does not align well for them. It is at home, which the previous game against the Rams was in LA, but I'm still not confident in Russell Wilson's ability to put up a big fantasy day. As far as the Jared Goff side of things are concerned, a lot of people might be assuming, why is Jared Goff a sit? The Seahawks defense is really bad. They're a great matchup for fantasy quarterbacks because you probably see on your Yahoo app or whatever app you use, it says they're like a top 5 matchup for quarterbacks. But a lot of those stats came at the beginning of the season when the Seahawks defense was really, really bad. I said over the past 5 games, the Rams are 31st against opposing quarterbacks. The Seahawks aren't too far behind them. They're at 28th. And the same argument I made for Herbert is don't get stuck to what was true earlier in the season. Because earlier in the season, the Seahawks were a terrible pass defense. They were a cupcake matchup for all quarterbacks and wide receivers. I will not be starting Jared Goff in this game. It's a slow-paced game, as I mentioned, and he underperformed mightily the first time that they got that those guys played, and that was actually kind of like the genesis of the Seahawks defensive turnaround. So I don't anticipate Jared Goff to have a great game in this one, nor do I anticipate the receivers to go absolutely bonkers like they did last week in this one. To the running back position in this game, we have Chris Carson as a start, and then I would say a low-end flex for Darrell Henderson, but only if you're desperate. Chris Carson is coming off a game where in a bad matchup last week, he actually looked quite good. Unfortunately for him, Carlos Hyde decided to house a 50-yarder, and his reward for getting siphoned last week on that is an even harder matchup against the LA Rams. I don't think he's a lock for your lineup. If you have better options, i.e. if Tony Pollard is the starting running back for the Cowboys, I would start him over Chris Carson if Ezekiel Elliott is out. Chris Carson I currently have as like my RB17. So I do think he is in a range where you might have better options than him if you have a pretty good team, and you probably do, considering this is fantasy championship week and your team is probably pretty good if you got to this point. So Chris Carson is by no means a lock to see your lineup, but I would start him as a result of the general like running back position scarcity and some of the injuries that we've seen. Darrell Henderson, on the other hand, is not a lock for your lineup at all. The Seahawks are an average matchup for the run recently, and McVay may elect to split running back carries and touches between Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown, with Akers likely out for this game with a high ankle sprain. So currently I have Darrell Henderson as RB26, and that's only just based on the fact that I think he's going to see some volume. He's around that Gio Bernard range for me, but he's behind guys like Jeff Wilson and Le'Veon Bell and even Kareem Hunt. So I would not start Darrell Henderson if I can help it. I don't think he's going to be very good this week against the Seahawks defense that is playing better from the run, the pass, all that kind of stuff. So I just don't think this is going to be an overly high scoring game, which is not bode well for someone like Henderson who may not see a lot of touches. To the wide receiver position, we have Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, DK Metcalf. Those guys are all starts, and I still think you can flex Tyler Lockett. I know everyone is sick of Tyler Lockett. If you own Tyler Lockett, he has been bad recently. He hasn't come through for fantasy owners, and if you have him, you're probably not even in the championship. So if you have him and you are in the championship, that's kudos to you because you built a great roster outside of him. But he has the ceiling to get the job done this week. And the reason I say that is because Metcalf is in a shadow matchup. And when Metcalf has been in shadow matchups, typically Tyler Lockett has done well. When you think back to his big games, that Cardinals matchup where Tyler Lockett dropped 50 points was because DK Metcalf was being shadowed by Patrick Peterson, and Russell Wilson just wasn't throwing at Patrick Peterson. Not necessarily he was being locked up, but it's just a situation where Tyler Lockett against Troy Hill in the slot, as you can see on the screen, is in line to see a better matchup than the two guys on the outside. And in their first meeting, Tyler Lockett did have 9 targets as well. It's possible we see similar volume with Metcalf locked down by Jalen Ramsey, and 9 targets for Tyler Lockett, generally speaking, is going to lead to a lot of fantasy production from a guy like Russell Wilson. On the Rams side of things, we have Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. Both have been quite the opposite of the Seahawks receivers who've had down games over that same stretch, but each guy is seeing great volume, and that has a lot to do with the way that the Rams offense shifted from a run-heavy approach to a pass-heavy approach. Again, about the time that the Seahawks game happened the first time, and they should be in for great volume this week. I want to caution fantasy owners, though, that once again, this is not a Seahawks defense that we saw earlier in the season. And although the Rams are passing much more, they are not an automatic lock for big fantasy production in this game. The other team on the other side of the ball gets paid as well. They're not just going to let Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp run wild on them. Shaq Griffin against Robert Woods, who's been playing really well lately, and Cooper Kupp against Ugo Amadi, also been playing pretty well lately. Is not a smash matchup, but it's not a bad matchup either. To the tight end position, finally, we have absolutely no tight ends to speak of in this game. We have 2-headed tight end committees for both teams, and neither team has a reliable fantasy option. All right, finally, let's get to the 2 primetime games, and then we can get out of here, and you guys can enjoy your Christmas Eve and your Christmas holidays if you're watching this on Friday. The Titans at the Packers, Sunday Night Football. Quarterback-wise, in this game, you start them both. Aaron Rodgers is currently my quarterback 1 for the 2nd straight week, and if he gets a Tennessee defense that has not been good at stopping receivers all season, it's not been good at stopping tight ends all season, and more importantly, it's not been good at stopping quarterbacks all season. So you can fire him up with absolutely no concerns in this game. Ryan Tannehill, on the other hand, has about a league average matchup in this game. And I usually save something like this for the wide receiver section, but PFF and Player Profiler don't expect a shadow for A.J. Brown. So that may upgrade Tannehill from a big play perspective, as we know A.J. Brown is capable of taking anything to the house. That upgrades Tannehill a bit, knowing that he can just avoid throwing at Jair Alexander anytime he's, spoiler alert, on Corey Davis. What they're probably going to do is bracket A.J. Brown with Byard or sorry, not with Byard, with Amos or Savage and one of their and Kevin King, their other cornerback, and then just lock Jair Alexander on Corey Davis and see how that works out. They have been doing that recently. I'll get into that in a second. But I think Ryan Tannehill is a pretty solid start in this game. I currently have him QB 10, right behind Jalen Hurts. To the running back position, we have Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones. Both of these guys to start. If you own either of these guys, they're probably a big reason why you are in the championship this week. Both of them had awesome weeks last week, and fire them both up this week as top 3 options. At the wide receiver position, we have A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, and Corey Davis. As I mentioned, Alexander is not expected to be on A.J. Brown as a shadow matchup, but in fact, the opposite. According to both PFF and Player Profiler, as you can see below, we have A.J. Brown against Kevin King. Good for a pretty solid advantage in that one. And as well, we have Jair Alexander on Corey Davis, which is a disadvantage for Corey Davis despite his great PFF grade. This makes A.J. Brown not only a sneaky DFS play, in my opinion, because he may get faded by players, but it also helps myself personally knowing that I have A.J. Brown, that this may be a downgrade for Corey Davis in this game, and A.J. Brown may see some more volume as a result. Jair Alexander has not shadowed a receiver since week 7 against Will Fuller, and I think that makes Davis a bit of a fade this week, knowing that he is probably just going to play sides, and that's what Corey Davis is going to be on him for. As you can see on the shadow matrix there, you can see Jair Alexander shadowed a lot at the beginning of the season, like 4 of the first 7 games. But after that, he didn't do it very much. And here are, since week 7, the last receivers that he has covered, according to Player Profiler. As you can see, some of these receivers he covered are 100% not the number ones on their offense. They have Justin Jefferson, who you could consider the number 1 in his offense. But Adam Thielen at that point in the season was the guy receiving the shadow matchups. Then we had River Craycraft, who 100% with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I'm not exactly sure if either of those guys played in that game. I'd imagine they were both out for that one, because I believe that was the game everyone was affected by COVID. But either way, Richie James went off in that game, and Jair Alexander was not in that against him in that matchup. We had Michael Pittman Jr., who was not nearly the number 1 receiver for that team. Allen Robinson 100% was, but Philadelphia, he wasn't on Jalen Reagor or Travis Fulgham. He wasn't on Marvin Jones in week 14 against Detroit. You get the point. He wasn't on DJ Moore in week 15. I think that all means that Jair Alexander is going to be on one side of the field. He's going to be on Corey Davis the majority of the time, and A.J. Brown is likely the receiver that has the better game in this one. On Devontae Adams, he's going to see shadow coverage from Malcolm Butler, who's been pretty good in shadow coverage, but I'm not betting against Devontae Adams. He had a down game last week, but if you were able to survive it, and I was in our listener league, then expect a bigger game out of Devontae Adams this week. To the tight end position in this game, we have Robert Tonyan as a start, and Jonnu Smith is kind of like a streamer. Both guys likely require a touchdown in this game. Good for Jonnu for finally getting some volume last week. I think if Corey Davis is clamped up in this game, there's a chance we see more of Jonnu Smith this week, which makes him a bit of a sneakier start, in my opinion, especially for DFS. Robert Tonyan, on the other hand, leads all tight ends in touchdowns this season, and I expect him to catch one in this game, being that the Titans are just so bad against the pass in general. Robert Tonyan's definitely a smash start, and if you have him, to be throwing him into your lineup. To Monday Night Football, the last game of the slate, the last game of the start-sit shows. This is the last time I will be talking about a start-sit game from this perspective this year, because we're not going to be doing any fantasy-related content in Week 17, because if you guys have fantasy games in Week 17, you really should be getting that fixed, because teams tend to sit their players and all that kind of stuff. So next week, just if you weren't aware, we will not be having fantasy content. We'll still probably go live before games and stuff just to kind of shoot the shit and talk football. But as far as videos, we're not exactly sure what we're going to be doing yet, so just stay tuned for that. But Monday Night Football, Bills at Patriots. Quarterback-wise, in this game, you start Josh Allen and you sit Cam Newton. Cam is just too inconsistent through the air to trust him. That's all it really comes down to. Josh Allen, who, however, although somewhat inconsistent in his own right, has a massive, enormous ceiling that you cannot sit in the fantasy championship. He had a down game, 13 fantasy points against New England at home last time in Buffalo. This one is on the road, which makes it a bit tougher. And you could say, well, Gilmore is out for this game, so that's an upgrade for Josh Allen, but he missed the first matchup as well. Stephon Gilmore did not play the first time these two teams played, and Allen was held in check through the air and on the ground. He rushed 10 times for 23 yards in their first game. All that being said, I cannot sit this guy for a guy like Jalen Hurts. I cannot sit this guy for a guy like Baker Mayfield. Allen's ceiling is only duplicated by like 3 quarterbacks in the entire NFL, maybe 4. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Aaron Rodgers. Those are the only 4 quarterbacks in fantasy this season that have shown the ceiling that Josh Allen has shown, which in my opinion makes him worth the risk. And on top of that, he plays Monday night. So it's all about the Monday night miracles in the fantasy championship. And I myself, unfortunately, I'm going to have to deal with Josh Allen Monday night because I play him in my home league, and I have to rely on him having a down game. But I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to be pretty good in this game, and I would start him with relative confidence, knowing that you could be getting a good ceiling game out of him, especially with him playing hot these past couple games. To the running back position in this game, you sit them all. You sit all the running backs in this game. The matchup for the Bills running backs is somewhat enticing with the Patriots defense being pretty bad against the run. But we know what this backfield is at this point. We've had 15 games, a two-way split between Moss and Singletary, where one guy gets a touchdown one week, or one guy gets a big play the one week, or none of them do. Unless you like headaches, honestly, just don't start any of these guys. Same goes for the Patriots. Harris is limited and banged up and probably won't even play. And Sony Michel is just not someone I want to be trusting unless absolutely desperate due to just massive injuries and scarcity on the waiver wire. So Sony Michel is like my running back, like 30, but I'm not comfortable starting him. I'm sure you guys are not comfortable starting him as well. And if you have to start him, it's probably because you're only absolutely desperate. To the wide receiver position in this game, we have Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley. Both guys are starts, and Jacoby Myers is a sit. If you want to trust any part of this passing game of the Patriots, be my guest, but Myers has been too inconsistent in terms of volume for my liking, so I'm not going to be trusting him in this matchup. Diggs, on the other hand, definitely has an upgraded matchup with Gilmore now out on the IR with a knee injury, I believe, or a quad injury. JC Jackson might be shadowing Stephon Diggs. If he's not, he'll just be his primary matchup. And as a result, Jonathan Jones on Cole Beasley might be a shadow matchup as well. Both guys are in for tougher matchups than they had last week against a banged-up Broncos group, as I've mentioned previously, but they still should be okay, especially with Gilmore out and Josh Allen playing hot. Finally, no tight ends in this game. Don't even worry about the tight ends. That's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this series for the season. We hope to be potentially splitting this up next year, so it's not as much work on me, and it's maybe a little bit more digestible in terms of the length of the video for you guys. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for all of our off-season content. This is not the end of the Fantasy Stock Exchange. We're going to be getting right into draft content, right into reflecting on how we did this fantasy season, right into what we've learned from the season, what we can take away for next year, coaching changes, then free agency is going to start, the combine, all that kind of stuff is coming up. So make sure you guys just stay tuned with the channel. As always, leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Comment any of your thoughts down below. If you win your championship this week, leave us a comment. Tell us how we helped you win your championship. If you lose this week, maybe we screwed you over. Sorry about that in advance, but subscribe to the channel if you are new, or if you have not already done so, and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we post videos. Peace out, guys. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy your fantasy championships. And everyone, good luck.
Why you need the money?